This is my true story. I spent my whole life providing for my son, giving him everything I could. But one day, the very boy I raised turned my love into humiliation. We went out together, and because I walked slower with my bad knee, he snapped at me in public. "You walk too slow. Just stay in the car." His words cut through me like a knife. That day, I realized I was no longer seen as a father, but as a burden. But what he forgot was the car was mine. And you won't believe what I did next. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. All my life, I believed a father's duty was to give, even when there wasn't much to give. I grew up with very little, working long shifts when I was young, saving every coin I could. My dream was simple: to own something that would make life easier for my family. For me, that thing was a car. Back then, owning a car wasn't just about driving. It was about freedom, security, and opportunity. I worked overtime at the factory, skipped lunches, and walked to work through rain and heat just to put money aside. Years later, I finally bought a car. It wasn't the fanciest model, but it was strong, reliable, and it became more than just a vehicle. It became a symbol of everything I had sacrificed for my family. When my son was young, that car carried him everywhere. I drove him to school in the mornings, no matter how tired I was after a night shift. I took him to his sports games, waiting in the car while he played, clapping for him when he came back with his friends. That car took us on family trips to the countryside, with his mother packing sandwiches and him sitting in the back seat singing along to songs on the radio. Every memory, every mile on that car felt like proof that I had given him something better than what I grew up with. When he got older, I let him use it freely. He borrowed it for college classes, job interviews, even for dates. I remember standing at the window once, watching him drive off in the car with a girl he liked. He looked so proud behind the wheel, and I felt proud too, because I had given him that chance. I never asked for gas money, never demanded he pay for repairs, and never questioned how much he used it. To me, he was my son, and if I had something, it was his as well. That was what being a father meant to me. Even the insurance, I paid it year after year. He didn't even know the numbers, didn't know how much it cost. He just knew the car was always there, always ready for him. I kept it that way because I thought keeping him safe was my responsibility. I told myself, one day he'll look back and understand how much I gave. One day he'll say thank you. That day never came. What hurt me most wasn't just that he used the car like it belonged only to him. It was that I believed the car was a bridge between us, something that tied us as father and son. I thought when he sat behind that wheel, he would remember who made it possible, who sacrificed for it. Instead, he treated it like it was his by right, as if I had no part in it. To him, I became the passenger. But to me, I was still the man who had built that dream from nothing. That car was never just metal and tires. It was my years of sweat, my skipped meals, my aching hands. It was the pride of being able to say, I gave this to my family. It was the proof that I was not useless, that I was still the provider even when my body slowed down. And in my heart, I believed he would always respect me because of that. But respect never came. It started small. At first, I didn't notice it, or maybe I didn't want to. My son began treating the car like it was already his. He would take the keys without asking, and when I reminded him to be careful, he would roll his eyes as if I was annoying him. He stopped saying thank you, stopped even acknowledging that the car belonged to me. To him, it wasn't my car anymore. It was his car, and I was just lucky enough to ride in it sometimes. When the gas tank was low, he never filled it. I would get in the next morning and see the needle near empty. I told myself, he's young, he's busy, he'll learn responsibility later. But the pattern continued. Every bill, every repair, every insurance renewal came from my pocket. He never once offered to share the cost. He used the car to impress his friends, to take his wife places, to go on long drives, and I stayed quiet because I thought peace was more important than confrontation. Then came the attitude. He began talking to me differently when we were in the car together. He drove fast, ignored my requests to slow down, and when I said something, he would snap. "It's fine, Dad. Stop worrying." It was as if my voice no longer mattered. I was no longer the father who once taught him how to cross the street safely. Now, I was just a passenger, a background noise he wished he could silence. Over time, the disrespect grew sharper. He would honk impatiently if I took too long to get into the car. He would sigh loudly if I asked him to stop at the store for something I needed. Once, when I asked him to help me carry groceries from the trunk, he muttered, "You're lucky I even drive you around." Those words stung more than any slap. Lucky? I had bought the very car he was driving. I was the one paying for the gas, the insurance, the registration. And yet somehow, I was the one being made to feel like a burden. His wife only made it worse. She spoke as though the car was theirs, not ours. She complained about me always needing rides, even though I never asked for anything more than the basics. I overheard her once saying, "Why doesn't he just stop going out so much? He's old. He doesn't need the car like we do." Old. That was the word she used, as if my age erased my worth. My son said nothing to defend me. He just nodded, as if she were right. I ignored it for a long time. I told myself family was more important than pride. I told myself keeping the peace was better than causing fights. I let myself believe that maybe he was just stressed. Maybe he didn't realize how his words cut me. But deep down, I knew. He knew exactly what he was saying. He knew exactly how little respect he gave me. And I knew if I let it continue, one day he would cross a line I could never forgive. And soon, he did. The day everything snapped was a quiet afternoon. My son asked me to go shopping with him. It wasn't unusual. Sometimes I tagged along just to get out of the house. My knees were bad, and I walked slowly, but I still liked being part of small outings. It made me feel like I still had a place in his world. That day, I thought maybe we could share some time together, like the old days when we laughed in that car, when we were a team instead of strangers. We pulled into the supermarket parking lot. He parked quickly, jumped out, and started walking fast toward the entrance. I got out carefully, leaning on the car door before taking a step. My knees ached, and it always took me a moment to steady myself. I called out, "Wait a second, I'm coming." But he didn't slow down. I saw him glance back once, his face already tight with impatience. By the time I reached the middle of the lot, he was several steps ahead. I was moving as fast as I could, but age doesn't forgive, and my body didn't move like his. That's when it happened. He turned suddenly, his voice sharp, louder than it needed to be. "You walk too slow. Just stay in the car." His words cut like a blade. People nearby, a young couple, an older woman with a shopping bag, stopped and stared. I froze where I stood, feeling all their eyes on me. My face burned, not from the sun, but from humiliation. My own son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders through crowded markets, the boy I had once slowed down for so he could keep up. Now he was yelling at me to stay behind because I walked too slow. I wanted to disappear. My hands trembled. I wanted to shout back, to remind him whose car he was driving, whose sacrifices had carried him here. But the words never came. Instead, I felt the weight of shame press down harder than my bad knees ever did. I turned slowly, step by step, and walked back toward the car. The people watching shook their heads. Some whispered. I lowered my eyes so I wouldn't have to see their pity. Inside the car, I sat alone, staring through the windshield. My son went on without me, pushing the cart inside like nothing had happened. He didn't care how his words had crushed me. To him, I was already invisible. As I sat there, I remembered a different time. I remembered when he was small and we walked through markets together. He clung to my hand, afraid of getting lost. I carried him on my back when his legs got tired. I slowed my steps so his little legs could keep up. I never once told him he was too slow. I never once left him behind. And now, after all those years, He threw those words at me like a curse. You walk too slow. Stay in the car. That moment changed something inside me. It wasn't just an insult, it was a revelation. I realized then that in his eyes, I was no longer his father. I was a burden, an obstacle, someone to be left behind. And if I stayed silent, it would only get worse. That day, in that parking lot, with strangers watching my humiliation, I made a quiet promise to myself. This would not be forgotten. I sat in that car for what felt like hours, though it was only minutes. The sound of my son's footsteps had already faded, but his words stayed echoing in my ears. You walk too slow. Stay in the car. I stared at the steering wheel, at the familiar dashboard, and suddenly the car felt less like mine and more like a prison. I had bought it with my sweat, with the aches in my back and the calluses on my hands. But now I sat inside it like a stranger, locked away, because my own son couldn't stand to be seen with me. When he came back with the groceries, he didn't even look ashamed. He tossed the bags in the back, sat behind the wheel, and started the engine. Not a single word of apology left his mouth. He didn't even glance at me. The silence told me everything. He didn't think he had done anything wrong. To him, I really was too slow, too weak, too much of a nuisance. That evening, when we got home, I went straight to my room. I closed the door quietly and sat on the bed, staring at the floor. I could still feel the heat on my face from the stairs in the parking lot. I had never felt so small, so humiliated, not even as a poor boy growing up with nothing. Poverty hurt, yes, but poverty never made me feel worthless. My son's words had done what hunger and hardship never could. They had stripped me of dignity. I didn't eat dinner that night. I heard them in the kitchen, laughing, clattering dishes, living their lives as if nothing had happened. I sat in silence, my stomach empty, but my chest heavy. My hands trembled as I thought back to all the sacrifices I had made. I remembered the nights I came home from the factory, covered in sweat and grease, slipping a little extra food onto his plate so he would grow strong. I remembered walking miles to save money on bus fare so that I could buy him his first school books. I remembered carrying him when he was too tired to walk, never once telling him he was too slow. Now here I was, the same father, but in his eyes I had become nothing more than a weight to drag around. My knees were weak, yes. My steps were slower, yes. But hadn't I earned the right to slow down? Hadn't I earned respect after years of running so that he could rest? That night, I lay on the bed and closed my eyes, but sleep didn't come. Instead, memories flooded me. Him as a little boy riding on my shoulders, him sitting in the passenger seat of this very car, asking me to teach him how to drive, him laughing when I cheered for him at his games. Each memory felt like a lie now, a cruel trick my own heart had played on me. I had given him everything, and in return, I received humiliation. Tears came, slow and silent, not because of pain in my knees or my back, but because of the pain in my heart. I felt invisible. I felt discarded. I felt like a father who no longer mattered. And in that long night, as the house slept around me, I realized something. Love without respect is not love at all. Family without dignity is not family. I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, this will not stand. This humiliation will not be the end of my story. As I lay awake that night, replaying the shame of the parking lot over and over, a different thought entered my mind, one I had pushed aside for years. That car, the same one my son treated like it was his birthright, wasn't his at all. It was mine. The papers, the registration, the insurance, all of it was in my name. Every number, every signature, every legal tie was bound to me, not to him. He had used it for years, but he had no claim. Not a single legal thread connected him to that car. And it wasn't just the car. The insurance policy he bragged about to his wife, the one that kept him covered every time he drove recklessly, was also paid by me. Every bill came in my name. He never saw them because I handled them quietly, making sure nothing ever lapsed. He thought adulthood meant freedom, but his freedom was built on my shoulders, on my money, on my willingness to keep things running. He believed time had shifted ownership, that because he drove it more, it had somehow become his. But the truth was simple. Without me, that car was nothing to him. I thought back to the day I bought it. My hands shook as I signed the papers because it had taken me years to save enough. I was proud because I knew it would help my family. Back then, my son was still young, still learning, and I wanted him to have something solid under him. And yes, I had let him use it freely. I never restricted him, never said no. I let him take it to school, to work, even to impress the woman who became his wife. I gave freely, thinking that kindness would plant gratitude in his heart. But instead, it planted entitlement. That night, lying awake, I realized something he had forgotten. Kindness is a choice, not a debt. I had chosen to give him access to the car, but that did not mean he owned it. He had mistaken my generosity for weakness. He thought I had no power left. He thought because my steps were slower, my hands weaker, my voice softer, that I no longer had control. But I did. More control than he ever imagined. In the eyes of the law, that car was still entirely mine. I could sell it. I could cancel the insurance. I could remove every privilege he took for granted. And suddenly, the humiliation I had felt in that parking lot began to shift into something colder, sharper. He had laughed at my slowness, told me to stay behind, made me feel like nothing. But what he didn't know was that I still held the keys. Not just the metal keys that started the engine, but the legal keys that decided who drove, who paid, who benefited. As this truth settled in my heart, I felt a strange calm. The shame of the day didn't vanish, but it changed. It hardened into resolve. My son had forgotten that I was still the father, still the provider, still the man who had built the foundation he stood on. He thought age had stolen my power. He thought arrogance gave him control. But he was wrong. The car was mine. The insurance was mine. And with a single decision, I could take it all away. And that was exactly what I decided to do. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. My body still ached from age, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. The humiliation from the day before burned inside me, but now it burned with purpose. I knew exactly what I needed to do. I would take back the car, take back the control, and show him that the father he thought was weak still held the power to change his life in an instant. I sat at the kitchen table quietly, sipping tea while my son and his wife were still asleep. On the surface, I looked calm. Inside, I was planning every step. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want yelling or screaming. I wanted silence, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any words. My revenge would not come with anger. It would come with paperwork, signatures, and a single phone call. First, I made a list. The car dealership I trusted, the insurance company's number, the documents I would need. Everything was in order, neatly kept in the drawer by my bed where I stored important papers. Registration, insurance, title, all in my name. My son had been too arrogant to even notice those details. He thought driving the car meant owning it. He never once asked about the paperwork, never once considered that true ownership lies in documents, not in usage. That ignorance would be his undoing. After breakfast, when they left for errands in the other car, I moved. I went to my room, gathered the folder with the car documents, and slipped it into my bag. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. It was as if my body knew this moment had been waiting for years. The humiliation from yesterday had unlocked something inside me that had been silent too long. I called the dealer first. A man I had known for years picked up the phone. I told him I wanted to sell the car, quick and clean, no delays. He trusted me, and he knew I was serious. We arranged to meet that same day. Cash would be ready. Then I called the insurance company. I explained clearly, cancel the policy immediately, effective today. Remove every connection to my son. The representative confirmed it without question. Within minutes, the car that had been the source of my shame became my weapon of justice. I did not tell anyone. I kept my face calm when my son came back later, talking about his plans for the week as if nothing had happened. He had no idea his world was about to shift. I sat there, nodding quietly, hiding the truth behind my silence. In his arrogance, he thought silence meant weakness. But silence, I realized, was my sharpest weapon. By evening, the car was gone. I had signed the papers, handed over the keys, and walked away with cash in hand. The insurance was canceled, the records erased, and my son was left with nothing but the memory of the car he thought was his. My plan was complete. And as I walked home, a strange calm settled over me. Yesterday, I had been humiliated in front of strangers, treated like a burden by my own flesh and blood. Today, I had taken back my dignity without raising my voice, without begging for respect. My son had forgotten who I was, but soon he would remember. That night, I sat in my room with the envelope of cash on the table. The car was gone, the insurance canceled, and yet I knew there was still one final step left. Staying in that house after what he had done would only invite more humiliation. He had already shown me what he thought of me. Too slow, too weak, too much of a burden. And if I stayed, he would believe I had accepted it. Number. This was the time to leave, to walk away quietly but firmly, and to let my absence become the loudest answer I could give. I packed slowly, carefully. Only the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my medicine, the folder of documents, and the envelope of cash. I didn't need much. Age had already stripped me of the desire for clutter or luxury. What I needed now was peace, dignity, a place where I could sit without being told I was too slow, where I could eat without being mocked, where I could breathe without feeling like I was in someone else's way. Before I left, I wrote nothing. No letter, no explanation. He didn't deserve one. Words would have been wasted on ears that refused to listen. My silence was enough. I left one thing behind, though, an envelope on the kitchen counter. Inside it was a single insurance cancellation notice, folded neatly, with the car keys resting on top, keys that no longer opened anything of value. I placed it there so he would understand, without doubt, that everything he had taken for granted was gone, and that it was my choice, not his. I waited until the house was quiet. They were in their room, lights out, sleeping peacefully in the comfort they thought would last forever. I walked slowly down the hallway, my bag in hand. Every step felt heavy, but not with regret. Heavy with the weight of years, years of sacrifice, years of giving, years of being silent while disrespect grew like weeds. But now, for the first time in decades, my steps were my own. The front door creaked slightly as I opened it. I froze, listening, but no one stirred. I stepped out into the cool night air, closing the door softly behind me. For a moment, I just stood there, breathing. The night was quiet, the stars above steady and indifferent. I felt small under them, but I also felt free. Truly free. I walked down the street slowly, my bad knee aching with each step, but I didn't mind. Each step away from that house was a step back into my dignity. At the corner, a taxi I had arranged earlier waited. The driver helped me with my bag, and I slid into the seat. As the car pulled away, I looked back once, just once, at the house I had built for my family, the house where my son had told me to stay in the car. My heart didn't ache anymore. It was cold, steady, resolved. That place was no longer my home. By the time the sun rose, I was gone. The next morning, my son walked into the kitchen, probably expecting his usual routine. He would make coffee, scroll through his phone, and then grab the car keys without a second thought. But instead of finding the car in the driveway, he found emptiness. No familiar shape, no polished hood gleaming in the sun, no comfort waiting for him. Just an empty stretch of concrete. Confusion must have struck first. Maybe he thought I had taken it for a drive, Or maybe he thought it had been stolen overnight. But then his eyes must have landed on the kitchen counter, the envelope, the folded paper, the useless keys. He opened it, and inside was the insurance cancellation notice with my name written at the top. His heart must have dropped when he read the bold letters. Policy canceled. Effective immediately. The car wasn't stolen. It wasn't borrowed. It was gone because I had made it gone. And for the first time in years, he was faced with a truth he had ignored. He owned nothing. Not the car, not the insurance, not the power he thought he had over me. He called me, over and over. My phone lit up with his number, buzzing with anger and panic. But I didn't answer. I didn't need to hear his excuses or his rage. Every call that went unanswered was a reminder to him that control had slipped from his hands. I imagined him standing in the driveway, his wife asking what happened, neighbors looking on as he tried to explain. The same neighbors who had heard him shout at me, the same people who had seen me treated like an afterthought. Now they would see him stranded, helpless, and exposed. The humiliation I had carried silently was now his burden to bear. Only his came with an audience. By midday, his anger turned into panic. He drove the second car, his wife's, to the dealership, trying to track down what had happened. But the papers were signed, the deal done, the money already in my account. Legally, he had no way back. He called the insurance company next, hoping maybe he could fix what was broken. But they told him the truth. The policy had been canceled at the request of the primary holder. And that primary holder was me. His name had never been on it. He had no claim, no rights, no power. That evening, I knew he must have sat in that empty driveway, staring at the space where the car once stood, feeling the silence I had left behind. I wasn't there to see his face, but I could picture it. The arrogance drained, the anger useless, the pride shattered. For the first time in his life, he would understand what it felt like to be dismissed, ignored, treated as though he didn't matter. And I didn't need to say a word. The silence was enough. In the days that followed, the weight of my actions settled heavily on my son's shoulders. He had grown used to comfort, to convenience, to the idea that everything in his life would simply fall into place because I was there to provide it. But with the car gone and the insurance canceled, reality hit him harder than any words I could have spoken. He was stranded, not just physically, but in pride. The man who once barked at me in public now had to borrow rides, beg favors, and explain to anyone who asked why his driveway was empty. Neighbors began whispering. They remembered his voice in the parking lot, sharp and cruel, telling me I was too slow, that I should just stay in the car. Now they saw him pacing outside, red-faced, phone pressed to his ear as he tried to reach me. But my phone stayed silent. Each unanswered call was its own punishment. He had silenced me with shame, and now I returned that silence with indifference. His wife wasn't pleased either. She had enjoyed the luxury of 2 cars, of insurance paid without question, of never having to lift a finger to maintain them. Now she was forced to share her car, to rearrange her routines, to carry the burden of his arrogance. I imagined their arguments filling the walls of that house, blame thrown back and forth, both of them realizing too late that the foundation of their comfort had never been theirs. It was mine, and I had taken it back. My lawyer later told me my son had called the office in a rage. He demanded explanations, demanded to know how it was legal, how it was possible that everything could vanish overnight. The lawyer simply told him the truth. Your father was the owner. He had every right. You had none. Those words must have stung worse than any punishment, because they revealed the truth he had denied for so long. He wasn't in control. He never was. Days turned into weeks, and his messages shifted. The rage became desperation. He begged me to call him back, to explain, to undo what I had done. He promised things would change, that he would treat me better, that he would make it right. But I had heard those empty words before, in smaller ways, and I knew they meant nothing. Change born from desperation is not change at all. It is fear. and I had no interest in being respected out of fear. I wanted dignity, peace, and honesty, things he had never given me. So I stayed silent. Silent as his pride crumbled, silent as his convenience vanished, silent as he learned the cost of disrespect. In the end, I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to shout or argue or humiliate him in public. My actions spoke louder than words ever could. The car was gone, the insurance was gone, and so was I. For the first time in his life, my son had to stand on his own without leaning on me. And for the first time in my life, I felt no guilt watching him struggle. Because this struggle was his lesson, one he had forced me to teach. When I left that house behind, I carried no regret with me, only peace. For years, I had swallowed my pride, ignored the insults, and told myself family was worth any humiliation. But in the quiet of my new life, I realized something important. Love without respect is nothing. A son who cannot treat his father with dignity is no son at all. So I built a new life for myself, far away from the house, the driveway, the sharp words, and the painful silence that used to hang over me like a shadow. I found a small apartment in another city. Nothing grand, nothing extravagant, just enough space for me, my belongings, and my peace. It sat above a grocery store with a small balcony where I could sit in the evenings and watch the streets below. No one hurried me here. No one sighed when I took my time. If I wanted to walk slowly, I walked slowly. If I wanted to sit all day in the sun, I did. Every step I took was my own, and no voice told me I was too slow, too weak, or too old. The money from the car sale gave me freedom. I didn't need to ask anyone for help, didn't need to beg for rides, didn't need to feel like a burden. For the first time in years, I used my money for myself, to buy good food, to pay for my medicines, to enjoy the simple things that had always been pushed aside for others. Each purchase reminded me that I was not a beggar at my son's table. I was a man who had earned his comfort through decades of hard work. And slowly, I began to heal. Not just my body, but my pride. I no longer replayed the scene in the parking lot where my son told me to stay in the car. Instead, I replayed my own quiet act of revenge, the moment I signed those papers and canceled that insurance. It wasn't anger I felt anymore. It was satisfaction. Satisfaction that I had stood up for myself, even if it was in silence. Sometimes I think of him. I imagine him standing in that empty driveway, phone in his hand, anger turning to panic, panic turning to silence when he realized I was gone. I don't smile when I think of it, but I don't cry either. It is simply the truth. He chose arrogance, I chose dignity, and in the end, I won. Now, when I walk to the market, I walk at my own pace, slow, steady, free. No one rushes me, no one mocks me. I carry my own bag of groceries home, and when I sit at my table to eat, I taste something I hadn't tasted in years: peace. Final thought. He said I walked too slow. Now he walks alone, without my car, without my insurance, and without me.